Cheers. Welcome. This is Ray Capote for the Misfits Mystique. So in the last episode, Gay Langland and Roslyn Tabor were at Guido's house. They just got back from the rodeo and everyone else fell asleep. And they were outside talking and they were discussing whether they wanted to get together and have a family, alluding to that. Roslyn had a little cold feet, and then Gay inexplicably just went inside and fell asleep. Then Roslyn went outside and she looked to the sky and said, "Help." So she wasn't sure if this is the right guy for her either. So this is episode 7, The Story of the Misfits, and it's part 5, episode 7, part 5. So then the scene opens up where the Misfits are heading towards the dry lake. So you have Gay Langland driving the truck with Roslyn Tabor in the middle, and then Perce Howland in the passenger seat. And they're gonna go up to the mountains to chase the mustangs. So Guido flies over the truck and he kind of moves his wings saying hello. So they get up to the dry lake, and apparently they left late because it's already nighttime. And they show Guido pointing up at the stars, and he's saying, it's like a little campfire. He says, "See that star up there? That light that we're seeing right now is coming from a star that's so far away it may not even exist." Kind of a weird thing to put in a movie, but the reason they did it is Guido's kind of the intellectual. I've been starting to figure out his character a little bit, and he's kind of Arthur Miller, I think, because he's kind of the intellectual. And Roslyn says to him, "Well, Guido, it's really nice to know things." And Guido says, "No, but you have something much better, Roslyn. You're connected to the whole thing. You can feel what everyone else is feeling." So what he's alluding to is her empathy for other people and mankind and animals. So they're sitting down, and then the dog started getting pretty nervous, and or Guido says to Gay, he says that he thinks that he knows that there's other animals up there, and that they're gonna get killed. So he let it out of the bag while they were up there. Roslyn actually didn't know that they were gonna catch these horses for cat and dog food yet. So they're talking this over, and then Roslyn says to Gay, "Is that right that you're going to kill them?"
Well, they're what they call chicken fields. Turn them into dog food. Well, I thought you knew that.
And he kind of looks at Guido kind of strange, because he kind of let the cat out of the bag. And so they walk about 20 feet, Gay and Roslyn, to the flatbed truck. And so he puts down a sleeping bag for Roslyn, and she lies down, and she's talking to him, and she says, well, let's take a look at this clip.
It all got changed around. See, I'm doing the same thing I always did. All I know is everything else is wages. This is how I get.
So as you can see, they were talking about, that Gay, that's his way of dancing. So in other words, Roslyn, the way she expresses herself is as a nightclub dancer, all right? And the way Gay expresses himself is wrangling horses, going to rodeos and then catching horses in the mountains. And the part about killing the horses is, everything, he has nothing to do with that. The world has changed, but he hasn't. So the dealers now, when they pick up the horses, they slaughter them and sell them for dog and cat food. Before the war, they were used as ponies. So Gay, in his mind, has nothing to do with that part of it. But Roslyn doesn't see it that way. She says, you can't be good if you're killing. And Gay said, well, sometimes you got to take some good with the bad, Roslyn, or else you're going to be running the rest of your life. So he alluded to how Roslyn is kind of not running away from commitments in her life. So Gay was talking about, when I was in the nightclub and I saw you, I appreciated how much you put into your dancing and how accomplished a dancer you were. But the guys that were there at the nightclub were looking at something totally different. So they dirtied it up. They bloodied it up. And so he's saying that because what he does as far as catching the mustangs, he has nothing to do with the other side where the folks come out and they pick up the horses, the dealers, and then they take them and slaughter them and sell them for dog food. In his mind, he has nothing to do with that, just as Roslyn has nothing to do with how these patrons at her nightclub, what they're thinking. And Gay said, well, I tip my hat off to you. And Roslyn says, you did? And then she kisses him. And so that was pretty cool. So go forward to the next morning. And they're putting fuel, gasoline in Guido's biplane. And so they're filling that up, and Roslyn says, wow, everything looks nice today. And Gay says, yeah, everything generally looks better in the morning. And I think there's definitely some truth to that. So they fill up the tank of the airplane. Guido gets in, takes off, heading to the other side of the mountains to look for the wild mustangs, the so-called Misfits. And I don't think I ever mentioned this, but the reason they call this movie The Misfits is that the characters in the movie, they're misfits. They don't really have a place in life like everyone else, like a regular job or so on and so forth. But the horses are also misfits. They're kind of what's left over from the olden times, and most of them, there's only a few of them, a pack of 15 here or 5 here. And they're kind of a dying breed, same with these characters in the movie. So Guido takes off. Gay and Roslyn and Perce get in the truck. Then they drive out to the flat lake bed, and they're waiting for Guido to come out through the pass, driving the horses back through. And, they show shots of Guido in the airplane. Most of that was done with Eli Wallach at Paramount Studios, Studio 2, where I would actually visited that a few weeks back. So it's real cool to think a lot of those shots were filmed in there. So they're waiting for them, and all of a sudden Perce says, look, they're coming through. And Gay couldn't believe it that they were already coming through the pass so quickly. And it turned out, because instead of the 15 that they thought that Guido said he saw the other day, there were only 6 this time. So he's driving him out, and it turns out to be a stallion, 4 mares, and a spring foal, which would be a colt. And so Peirce was always having misgivings. If you recall at the telephone booth when they first met, he said, well, what do you expect to get out of it, 15 horses? If it was 1,000, like the olden times, sure, at 6 cents a pound. So now we're looking at only 6 of them coming out, and a spring foal, just a little guy that isn't going to fetch anything. So Guido drives him out onto the dry lake bed, and then he parks the plane, tie the plane down, they tie Tom Dooley down, and they all rush to get onto the truck. So they had loaded the truck with tires, with ropes on it, with a lasso. So they would get in the truck, and Guido was driving with Roslyn in the passenger seat, and Peirce and Gay on the flatbed. They tied themselves to the boards behind the cab, and then they start chasing these horses that are on the dry lake bed. And they did this really well. The cinematographer Russell Meddy really did this nicely. And I heard that never before had they actually used wild horses in scenes like this. So let's take a quick look at that. So as you can see, it was a beautiful scene. The guy, when they shot the cowboys from the back, those were the stuntmen, and then obviously the forward shots were the actors. So they lassoed these horses up, and then they parked the truck. And so Gay and Guido get out, and then Peirce is talking to Roslyn. She's pretty distraught. And Gay says, Peirce, come over, we need you. And so they go out, and they're going after the stallion, and so he's tied to the tires. What the tires do, so when they lasso them, they throw the tire off of the truck, and then the drag of the tire will eventually slow down the horse, and then they get so tired they stop in certain areas of the dry lake, and then they go out. So they went for the stallion, and they each had a rope, and so they lassoed him, and there was a big struggle. But the incredible thing is the actors, director John Huston insisted that he had to have the actors in there doing this, or else it wouldn't look realistic. For certain scenes that are more dangerous, they did use some stuntmen. So you can see Gable's face, you can see Eli Wallach, you can see Montgomery Clift. Apparently Clift was terrified, and Gable said, look at Montgomery, look at his face, man. He looks like he saw a ghost. He was so pale, and he forgot his gloves, so he ended up blooding up all his hands. So they eventually take down the horse. Actually, during that, Roslyn's in the truck looking at this, and she's just really upset. She thought it was cruelty, and so she runs at Gay and says, "Stop it, Gay! Stop killing it!" And Gay pushes her aside, and check out this. So as you can see, Monroe, little stunt woman in her there. She went flying onto the ground. So they tied the stallion down, And then, they were talking a little bit, and Gay and Guido and Peirce were off to the side, and Peirce, or Gay was saying, you know what, there is something to what you were talking about. When it's so much fewer, it seems, more cruel, as opposed to when you have many. It harkens back to, you drop a bomb and there's a million people that died. They call that a statistic. But when you get someone, in your town that and you see it on TV, there was a murder in this town, then that's a homicide, that's a killing. So there's some truth to that. So they're discussing, what they're going to do with the horses, and Gay says, you're right, it doesn't make sense. And then, I think, why don't we just give Roslyn these horses? And right at that moment, Roslyn comes over and tells Gay, hey, you know what? I'll buy them from you. I'll give you $200. Is that enough? And then you look at Gay's face, and he was obviously insulted by it. And he says, that's when he changed his mind. Because who do you think you've been talking to this whole time? He told Roslyn. And he said, no, I'm used to I'm used to working with the dealers. The only thing they're after to buy is just the horses. Like, they don't want to pay me off. So he was really upset, and he says, let's get back in the truck. So we just covered episode 7, part number 5, the story of the Misfits, the plot. So thank you for joining me. Cheers. My name is Ray Capote for the Misfits Mystique. Have a great evening.